There's one question every time travel movie has to answer. Most writers don't even know it exists. The audience clocks it instantly, though. It's why some of these films feel right and others feel cheap. You can never put your finger on why. Now, what is that question? Well, before I tell you, I want to show you the films where you've already felt it failing. You just didn't have the words for what you were looking at. Back to the Future. Pretty much everyone's seen it. Marty's parents don't kiss at the dance, Marty starts disappearing. He's also carrying a photo of him and his older brother and sister, taken in front of a well years earlier. And as his parents drift further apart that week, the photo starts fading. First, his brother Dave's head goes, then Dave's whole body, then his sister Linda. That is a rule. One timeline. If the past changes, the future overwrites itself and Marty and his siblings stop existing. Look at the photo, time's running out. Okay, fast forward. Parents kiss, Marty fixes it, he drives back to 1985, pulls up to his house, and wakes up the next morning and everything's different. His dad's a successful science fiction author now. His brother's wearing a suit and has a corporate job. His sister has a boyfriend. His mom looks a lot thinner. They are completely different people from the family Marty left. Hold on though. If the rule was one timeline overwriting itself, shouldn't Marty come back to the same family with his parents just in love now? Where did this brand new wealthy McFly family come from? Why do these specific people exist in the new timeline when an hour ago the rule was, if the timeline shifts, you cease to exist? The film picked two rules, one for the tension, one for the payoff. And we've been so busy loving it for 40 years that almost nobody stops to talk about which rule was actually true. The biggest movie of all time did the same thing. Well, okay, maybe not the biggest, but bear with me for a moment. In Avengers Endgame, Bruce Banner pulls out the time travel explanation in front of the team. He lays out the rule. If you go into the past becomes your future, and you can't change it. Closed loop, one timeline. The past is the past. Scott chimes in with,
"So Back to the Future is a bunch of bullshit?"
This is one of the highest grossing movies ever made, setting up its time travel rules in front of a global audience. The past cannot be changed. Got it. 2 hours later, Captain America takes the Infinity Stones back to their original moments, and instead of coming home, he just stays. Marries Peggy Carter, lives a whole life with her in the past, and comes back at the very end of the film as a 90-year-old sitting on a bench, passing the shield to Sam. The movie never explained how that fits the rule it spent the second act establishing. The Russos have been doing damage control in interviews ever since, the audience has been arguing about it on Reddit, and in the YouTube comment section. Hey, be my guest. People clocked it. They just couldn't name what they were clocking. Both films broke the same thing the same way. The break sits underneath all the timeline math people keep arguing about. That loops back to the question every time travel movie is answering, whether the writer thinks about it or not. Some of them notice they're answering it. Back to the Future and Endgame, though, didn't. So, here's the question, though technically it's two. Every time travel movie has to answer two things before it answers anything else. Before the wormholes, before the DeLorean, before the quantum tunnel. Two questions, and your film picks an answer whether the writer thinks about it or not. Question 1. When you go back in time, were you already there? Like, was the time-traveling future version of you always in that moment, doing the stuff you're about to do from the perspective of people who lived through it the first time? Or did your arrival actually change what happened? Because before you showed up, you weren't there. It sounds dumb and confusing when you say it out loud. It happens to be the most important question in the entire genre. Question 2 is the same problem from the other side. When you go back, who gets to change things? Just you because you know more than everyone else? Everyone because the past is now live again? Nobody because the whole thing has always been going to play out that way and that's just that? Your characters either have power over reality or they're acting out a script that already exists. The film picks. Two questions, self-consistency and free will. Mix up the answers halfway through your movie and the audience instantly clocks. Something's wrong. Watch what happens when you apply this to Back to the Future. Question 1, was Marty always in 1955? No, he showed up in the DeLorean. His parents have never met him before. The past changed when he arrived. That's a branch. Question 2, who has free will? Well, apparently everyone, since Marty's interference rewrites his entire family by the time he gets home. Okay, fine, that is a coherent rule set until the photo fade, because the photo fade only makes sense in the opposite rule set, one single timeline being overwritten in real time. If a brand new branch already exists with brand new McFlys living perfectly fine lives, why does Marty start disappearing? In the branching model, he just lives on in the new branch alongside the new family. The movie answered the question, the same question, two different ways inside 1 hour. Inside one film, the writer set up contradictory rules, and the audience felt the friction even when they couldn't name what was wrong. Endgame pulled the same move. Bruce says,
if you travel to the past, that past becomes your future, which can't now be changed by your new future.
change it? That's a closed loop answer. You were always there. Cap was always married to Peggy at some point in the past. Okay, fine. But then Cap shows up on the bench in the present in the team's active timeline, 90 years old, handing the shield to Sam. The closed loop rule requires we never see him do that. In a closed loop, the past stays in the past. Cap should still be in the 1940s where he ended up. The film held that rule for 2 hours, and then broke it in the last 5 minutes to give us a feel-good ending. Now, watch what happens when an entire franchise picks two opposite answers across two films. James Cameron makes The Terminator in 1984. Future John Connor sends Kyle Reese back to protect his mother, Sarah. Kyle and Sarah fall in love. Kyle is John's father. John exists because of the time travel. Question one's answer? Yes. The loop was always there. Future was always going to be the future. Closed loop. Clean. Cameron makes Terminator 2 in 1991. Sarah Connor's whole motivation is no fate but what we make. She breaks into Cyberdyne with her son and the T-800 and blows up the lab to prevent Skynet from ever existing. Film ends with her as a grandmother in a sunny park. Hold on though, if Skynet never exists in this new future, Skynet never sends a Terminator back to kill Sarah. Future John never sends Kyle back to protect her. Kyle never fathers John. John doesn't exist anymore. The film's hero just erased himself out of being born. Are you still following? T1 and T2 picked opposite answers to question 1. Both films are classics. Most audiences would never bring it up. But the second movie requires the first movie's rule to be wrong, and Cameron just kinda blew past it. And then, sometimes a writer picks a totally different rule. Edge of Tomorrow. Tom Cruise's character kills this alpha mimic and gets sprayed in its blood. And now, every time he dies, the day resets. Whole battle restarts, everyone wakes up with no memory, but he keeps everything. Question 1. Was he always there before? Well, it doesn't apply. Each loop rewrites the previous one. Question 2. Who has free will? Only him. Everyone else is on rails. Same battles, same conversations, same deaths, until he changes something. It's a third framework, the do-over. One person with agency, everyone else locked in. The film holds together because it picked that rule and stuck to it the whole way through. So there's 3 rules now: closed loop, branching timelines, and do-over. There are more out there, but these examples might have already broken your brain. It certainly did with mine. Luckily, the point isn't the list. The point is, once you can see these rules, you can pinpoint the exact moment any time travel movie breaks one. And the films that don't break are the ones that committed to a rule and trusted it would carry the story. So, what does that look like? 12 Monkeys, Terry Gilliam, 1995. Bruce Willis plays James Cole, a guy from the future sent back to gather info about a virus that wiped out most of humanity. The whole film, he's haunted by this recurring dream of being a little kid in an airport, watching a man get shot to death right in front of him. You think the dream is just dread, the thing that's been haunting him from his childhood. Whatever. End of the movie, adult Cole is at the airport trying to stop the virus carrier from boarding a plane. He pulls out a gun. Airport security shoots him dead. Camera pans across the crowd. Young James Cole is standing right there, watching the whole thing. That's been happening his entire life. He's been carrying around the memory of his own future death since he was a child, and he never knew it. Closed loop. He was always going to die at that airport. He was always going to be the man little James was watching. The film picked the closed loop rule on page 1 and held it all the way to the final shot. The film never broke it. Prisoner of Azkaban pulls basically the same trick in a kids movie. Hang on, wait, is Harry Potter a kids movie? Whatever. Hermione's got the time turner. She and Harry go back a few hours to save Buckbeak the Hippogriff and Sirius. Earlier in the film, Harry was on the wrong side of a lake getting his soul sucked out by the Dementors hunters, and a giant glowing stag Patronus came roaring across the water from somewhere on the other side and drove them off. He thought it was his dead dad coming back to save him. Then, time-traveling Harry winds up on the other side of the lake. He looks across at his earlier self getting attacked and realizes, oh, the Patronus had to come from somewhere. The thing he saw earlier was him. Future him. He had to be the one to cast it. The actual line he says is,
I knew I could do it this time because, well, I'd already done it.
The film never uses the words self-consistency or closed loop, because remember, kids movie. Wait, is Harry Potter a kids movie? Doesn't matter, but it commits to the rule. Looper does something even smarter. The body modification scene. Old Seth tries to escape the Looper system. The mob catches young Seth, his past version. To force old Seth to come back, they don't shoot young Seth. They take a knife to him. They carve an address into his arm and tell him to deliver himself to that address. Old Seth, across the city, watches the message appear as scars on his own arm. The mob takes young Seth's fingers off. Old Seth's fingers vanish in real time. They take his nose, then his foot, and old Seth has to get out of his car, and while walking, his legs disappear. Rian Johnson never has anyone in the movie say, "We operate under a closed-loop timeline where modification to the past propagate to the present version of the same biological entity." I mean, come on, nobody talks like that. He just shows you a guy losing his fingers from a wound someone else is inflicting 2 miles away. The audience immediately understands the rule and immediately understands why it matters. Then there's the version of this where the writer goes all in on a tentpole budget and trusts the audience anyway. Interstellar. Cooper falls into a black hole and ends up in this tesseract, this 5-dimensional space behind the bookshelf in his daughter Murph's bedroom. From inside there, he can knock books off the shelf. He can manipulate gravity to send messages. He's the ghost Murph has been seeing in her bedroom since she was 10 years old. That ghost has been haunting her the whole movie. The film makes you think it's some unexplained spiritual thing. Then, in the last act, we find out it's her father. Specifically her father from after he became the ghost. From after his entire mission. Cooper sends his younger self the coordinates that started the whole journey. The reason he went to space is eventually himself, after the fact. Future humans built the Tesseract for him. Future humans only exist because Cooper went to space. Closed loop, end to end, I think. Nolan picked the rule and he committed to it from start to finish. The whole emotional climax, the sequence of Murph realizing her ghost was her dad, only works because the loop holds. That's what these films have in common. Each one picked a rule and trusted it to carry the story. Audiences usually couldn't tell you what the rule was called, they just felt every one of those scenes landed different from the broken ones. And then there are the writers who took the rule and pushed it a little further than most films dare to. Primer, 2004, made for $7,000 by a guy named Shane Carruth, who also stars in it. 2 engineers in a garage accidentally build a time machine out of what's basically a fancy storage box. The rule? They sit in the box for 6 hours, and when you step out, it's 6 hours earlier. Well, what an invention. The film is famously incoherent on first watch because the characters use the boxes recursively. They start using multiple machines and even create fail-safe machines. They go back to set up boxes for future versions of themselves to use. By Act 3, there are at least 4 versions of the main character moving through the same week, and viewers just can't follow it. I mean, I couldn't. I had the same problem while writing the script, so you might expect me to say Primer broke its own rule. But nope. Primer never breaks its own rule. Not once. Every weird thing on screen is the consequence of sit in the box for 6 hours, step out 6 hours earlier. Played out across a couple of obsessive engineers who refuse to stop optimizing. Carruth doesn't simplify, and he doesn't have anyone explain anything. The people who do follow along regard it as the most rigorous time travel film ever made, because it's earned the chaos by playing fair. Then there's Tenet. Oh, Tenet. Whole new framework. Instead of jumping through time, certain objects and people get their entropy reversed and start moving backwards through it. Want to go back to last week? You step inside this turnstile machine, and then you have to actually live the week backwards before you can rejoin the forward flow. You still following? Good. Okay, good. There's a sequence in a hallway where the protagonist fights a masked man in body armor and loses. Later in the film, after he's been inverted, he comes back to that same hallway moving backwards through time and fights his earlier self. He's the masked guy. He always was. He just didn't know it yet. Closed loop framework with an entropy mechanic glued on top. I mean, the movie is exhausting though. People walked out. People watched it 3 times trying to figure it out. Nolan didn't care. The rules hold the entire runtime, even when the audience can't keep up. But as a cherry on top, there's the pure version. Predestination, 2014, based on a Heinlein short story. Sarah Snook plays a character named Jane and a character named John. Ethan Hawke plays the barkeep and the fizzle bomber. Over the course of the film, you find out all 4 characters are the same person at different points in their life. John is his own father. Jane is his own mother. The barkeep is the version that recruits him into the time travel agency. The fizzle bomber is what he eventually becomes. There's no entry point. The character creates themselves in a closed loop with no beginning. You walk out of that film feeling like your brain has been rearranged. Not one of these films breaks. The writers picked a rule, took it past where most films dared to go, and trusted some portion of the audience to come with them. The rules holding is the only reason any of these films work at all. And once you've seen what these films are doing, it turns out time travel was never really the concept being misunderstood. Strip the time travel out of every one of these films, and what you've got left is one question. Do actions have consequences in this story, or don't they? That question is the one every story ever told is built on. A hero saving a life feels heavy because we believe it cost them. When a villain wins, the loss has to feel permanent or nobody cares. Cause and effect is the engine, always. Most sci-fi premises just assume causality and move on. Aliens land, things get worse, robots wake up, things get worse. Causality is like invisible furniture. Time travel is the one premise that picks up the furniture and shows it to you. The minute someone steps into the past, the writer has to decide out loud whether actions matter, whether choices count for anything. The good ones answer it cleanly. The bad ones flunk it and leave you blaming the wormholes for something else entirely. So, the most misunderstood concept in science fiction has been hiding underneath the time travel one the whole time. Free will. Whether anything anyone does in a story actually matters at all. 40 years of arguing about wormholes. And the whole time, the genre was running the most important test storytelling has. If you want to see another version of this, what happens when sci-fi writers pick up some other invisible piece of furniture and drag it out into the open, there's a video on the channel about why writers keep blowing up planets and why it makes no sense. Click here to find out.